You know,
Okay.
this is a new experience for me. You've asked me to unmute. Usually people are telling me to shut up. It's the opposite.
Okay. Let me just set here, share screen. Okay, we're going to start with open group 1. This is the one that I told you about that has 6 entries.
Right.
Okay, here we go. Birth of Spring.
One of the things I like about the image is that the maker saw something they find attractive, which is this, tree coming into bloom, and the difference in size between the main tree and the secondary trees. I'm going to try to get my annotate tool up here. Okay, you've got your main tree and you've got some separation with your secondary tree and your tertiary tree. And I think that kind of falls into play nicely. I'm a huge fan of asking myself some questions, though, before I take the image. What are my main points of interest? Do I have leading lines? How's my foreground, my middle ground, my background? And with that being said, let's talk about how some of those elements line up. The foreground element, I think, is clearly, you don't have a lot of images tonight, right?
No, we don't.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more. The foreground element is this main tree in the middle. Now, the main tree is being supported by the 2 posts, and the 1 post is merging with the grates in the background. So there's a merger right there that I think we should be concentrating on to separate. The next thing is we've got a line of this tree line in the back, which kind of merges with some of the branches of the main tree. I would pay attention to detail on that. The next thing is, what are my leading lines and where are they leading me to? If your leading line is your walkway, it's very anemic and it takes me right out of the frame. If your leading line is the 1 tree, the triangle created right here between the tops of the trees, you start me in the middle and you lead me out of the frame again. It's balanced by the 1 tree that's in the background, which I think is nice, but definitely in the way we've processed this, which we'll get to in a second, I feel that we're not really balancing the overall feel of this image. So decide what your foreground is. If you have a leading line, what's the best way to present it to lead the viewer in and throughout your image? The other thing I like to mention about this is the processing. In the processing, not only have we really oversaturated our greens and desaturated some of our other colors, I have to ask, is this picture really about the greens or is it about the new growth on the trees? So I think we've got reversed our priority on color for this particular image. The next thing is we've added so much contrast that look at how these trees don't separate from each other. That doesn't even separate from anything that's not presenting as white on that tree. The same thing in, with the rest of the trees. In your mulch, you've got absolutely almost no detail whatsoever. So it's a heavy-handed contrast, I think, is working against what you're trying to do here. And here's your last merger. You've got that line right there, and it lines up right with the bottom of the trees. I'd love to see you get higher or lower to separate that. 6.
She works hard for the money.
So for this particular person, I do think that you're telling a very nice story of somebody who is working very hard for the money. A couple of things I would like to talk about are, lighting is not the best, but I think you've done a good job with it. Are there things that you could do to improve the lighting without coming back at a different time of day? One of them is simplifying your composition somewhat, so you're focused more on a piece of this frame than the overall scene, because the background is getting, taking a lot of attention away. The next thing is your angle of view. You're taller than this individual, and I think it would give the individual a little more grandeur. The story is, is this individual working hard for their money by, squatting down ever so slightly. It's usually best to shoot eye level or just below eye level. unless there's a reason for it. And I don't know that we have that reason here. You know, the person selling stuff, they're overlapping the hats. Not that I'm taking any points off for that, but would I try to position, if you want to show all of this, I would try to reposition myself away where I could see the bags and the hat a little bit more. The next thing is there's something funny going on with your background. Take a look here. We've got these repeating clusters of shapes right there that look like they were cloned in. We've got it again right here, and in here and in here. So something weird's going in the background. Her hand is not moving because you can see her arm's not moving, her thumb's not moving, yet she's totally blurred all up in here, and I have to ask why. If there's something that you needed to eliminate, there are other ways to go about it. I love to, you know, we can always talk about that at the end of the night if you'd like to. 6.
Matterhorn.
We have a very simple composition here. I think that you've got something of interest in all aspects of the frame. I think you lead me through nicely. Your exposure is well handled for the bright tones. I would consider opening up shadows a little bit in your dark tones here on the right side. I think you could balance your image a little bit more. A couple of other things. We have the inclusion of what I think might be a tree in your foreground right here. I'm going to erase it and you look underneath it. And if that is, it's a little hard to tell on a small thing, but I think we have a tree kind of all up in here. You know, does that tree in your foreground add strength to your composition? Or could you reposition yourself in such a place that you eliminate that tree if it doesn't add strength to your composition? And I don't think it does per se. The next thing I want to talk about is I'm checking my own screen. Okay, I think a lot of that is actually on my own screen. You might have a couple little blemishes in the sky. I would try to clean those up a little bit. I'm not putting them in the scoring because I think it's probably my screen more than it is your image. But you know, the simplicity definitely keeps my attention where you want it to be. 7.
Falling petals.
My comments for this particular image are going to be similar to one of the earlier images. You know, in color, you're getting some separation between the different elements, but the degree of contrast is really not separating your main design elements from each other. Would I try to reposition myself so that your primary tree is not competing and overlapping for attention with your secondary tree? You know, when I take an image, I'm looking at my overall scene without the use of my camera at first, and I'll move around to different locations and get a feel for what the scene feels like. Then I'll bring the camera up to my eye and look through just the viewfinder because it narrows my field of view and I can see more clearly what kind of end result I'm going to get. And then finally, and I'm going to get higher, lower, left, right, closer, more wide angle. And then finally, I'll be on the tripod looking through all aspects of the viewfinder and confirming that my previous work is getting me to get the result that I want. I have to ask, why, when you look at the bottom right side, do we have a border that comes in, gets bigger, comes along the bottom, and then it's not on the top right, it's not at the top, it's not on the left? 6.
What's cooking for dinner?
You know, it's a very interesting composition. I like the angle that you're shooting on this vessel because it's allowing me to see inside the vessel, and there's a lot of cool things going in that really give this a crazy kind of feel to it. You've elected to process this in a way that has a very HDR look in an open competition as something that's hopefully not true to reality. I don't have a problem per se with that. I would say what part of the story, it's about voodoo or whatever you want to call what's going on here. And the staff seems to be a big part of it. Would I include where the staff meets the ground? Or would I let it take me out of the frame? I do think the staff is pretty important. You've kept it in the frame without removing it yourself. So that's another thing. The next thing I want to ask is that, except for the HDR look of all of this, it does have sort of a feel of reality as a photo, yet something weird is happening in your processing on your bottom corners. How could your ground have some detail right here, and then closer to the camera where this is in focus, you don't? It's all blurred here. Why is that? Does it serve a purpose? You see the same thing on the lower right corner. 7.
Corniglia. Part of my pronunciation.
Your pronunciation is correct, but I don't believe that's Corniglia, but it doesn't really matter. Titles don't matter. Awesome location. I thought Corniglia was high up on the hill, away from the water. Not positive, but I think so. It's irrelevant. It's not in the scoring. I do like your composition. I like the way you start me in on the bottom, how you lead me in and through the image, how this leads me down into the image, how you have a landing enough here to take me up and in and through. If you want to include a little bit this on the top, so be it. I think that it's pleasingly placed in the frame. So your effort into your composition, I think, is nicely handled. The time of day is not your friend. And what has happened is you've got a tonal range here that's too much for your camera sensor to handle. Your eye sees 35, 40 degrees of brightness to darkness well. Your camera sensor only does 6 or 7. So we're getting no detail down in here. We're getting blown out here in the leading line of the boats. We're blown out in the water over here. The sky is absolutely blown out, whether you like that or not. The sky, I can argue. The rest of it, I think we can do a little more with shadows, highlights. I would definitely look at your histogram on the back of your camera and make sure you're not touching that right side. Keep your blinkies on so you can see what is touching that right side and make a decision on what you want to do. If you can't get here during the best light, well, then what are your other options? Multiple exposures, tripod mounted. This is extremely easy in this day and age. All I would do is I would take an exposure in manual mode so that the sky, which is the brightest thing in the frame, and those boats on the lower left looked good. And then I would take another one where the buildings look good. And then I'd take another one where these darker tones over here look good. And then all you have to do, there's many ways to do this, but a really simple way is in Lightroom, in the grid mode, click on all 3 images. And then what you do, I'm going to tell you exactly. Give me a second here. I'll look at my computer. I have Lightroom open next door here. You go up to photo, slide down to photo merge, and then an open window pops on the right side. Go to HDR and release. And most of the time, your camera will balance all 3 exposures for you really well. And it takes about 20 seconds, and you don't really have to do anything. So that's something that you could do to help. 7.
Okay, so we have 3 for round 2. Okay, Matterhorn.
7.
What's cooking for dinner?
8.
Corniglia.
8.
Okay, from these 2, we'll pick a first place.
I'm going to go with Corniglia.
Okay. Stonebridge Photo Club, Group 1, first place, Jerry Morelli. Excellent job that Jerry did. I don't think he's here tonight, though. Okay, now we're going to do Group 2. And open Group 2, we have 32.
Okay,
Okay,
yes. And this is your top group, right?
that's correct. It's cold outside.
Your choice of selective focus, I think, brings more attention to the blanket, which is, in my opinion, why you took this image in the first place. So I think that's kind of interesting. Couple of things. We've got this vertical tree trunk, that runs, as you could see, right up the middle of the frame. We're not really giving a base on the bottom. That's just my personal opinion. No points come off for that. At the top, we're not really seeing a whole lot of the split. Would the balance of the picture change a little bit and be a little more interesting if we swung the camera up slightly and showed a little bit more of the trunk bifurcating at the top instead of having just this like one vertical little strand running up through the middle of the picture and not a whole lot more? The other thing is the background. We do suffer from some exposure. We're a little bright in certain areas. And then once again, how is the trunk at this distance from your sensor or your camera, we'll say, for ease of understanding and focus. And then, we kind of fall off in here. This grass isn't selective focus, should be in focus. If we're going to soften our background, which is fine, if that's what you want to do, look under where I'm drawing right now. I'm going to take it away. We didn't bring it in all the way to the tree. So, it looks like same thing on the other side. So it looks like it's, not done with as much detail as would be beneficial for a competition. 6.
Love Among the Tulips.
So for this particular image, and for all images, I always ask myself, what is the intent of the maker? All right, your title says love amongst the tulips. Do I really get a true sense of love amongst the tulips? The fact that it's in your title is irrelevant. But to me, we have two people that are, holding each other. One is going for the tulips. And let's look at where everything's happening. This person totally blocks out that person. So the only way I know there's really a bond is because we've got, this hand over here. And then I'm not so sure we have another. All right, so that's one hand. The other hand here is 2, is down there. We've got 3, we've got 4. We've got another hand coming in, which, something's looking a little fugazi here. We've got somebody with 3 hands. The next thing is, if the intent is for the person in the background to be holding the flower, we can't really even see the interaction of the hand with the flower. If the intent is the interaction between the two individuals, this person over here is not only not paying attention to the person behind them, but they're not even looking at the flower they're trying to show them. So for me, I see a major disconnect in what is the intent of the image. 6.
Cattle egret in the underbrush.
The cattle egret is pleasingly placed in the frame, and I think you caught the head feathers in awesome posturing, being erect like that. I think the head position is very nicely handled. This is a very difficult image to take because of its location. It's tight into the background, so your bird is not going to stand out real nice. And it's also shot at a time of day when it's very contrasty light. Look at the eye. The eye has no light on it because the brow, which is not even that big, is blocking it. So your light is coming in at a pretty steep angle. Couple things. One, if you're going to show me this whole bird, why are we clipping a couple of the toes? I'd love to see the toes, leave space for them. They blend into the twigs, a little harder to see. The next thing is the whites. We've got not hardly any detail in 85% of the whites. So you have to watch your histogram. Make sure you're not riding up the right side. If you are, you need to get into manual mode, which is my preferred way of shooting. And then make sure you move your histogram so that it's just shy the right side. And fill flash would be very helpful here. Flash on TTL, not at full power. Put it at -1 2/3. Some cameras will say -1.7. Some will say -1.633, but -1 2/3 for white. 6.
Alad tortoise, whatever.
Difficult titles lose 2 points if the speaker can't say the title. So, all right, just kidding.
I hope not.
I'm only joking. So, I think you've done a very nice job in your processing. Your use of black point to white point is well handled here. Your conversion to black and white is also handled pretty nicely. It's not just a matter of desaturation. It looks like some effort was taken into all of this. The interplay between the one tortoise shell and the other tortoise head is kind of cool. We do have a little bit of dead space up in here, and could you eliminate that a little bit? If you can move to the left a little bit more, you could probably eliminate that so it's not so much like, that front part of the frame. And then, this, I think it would be a little helpful, but I absolutely like the concept of what you're doing here. 7.
Having a snack in the bushes.
The interplay between, between your bird and the fish is really cool. It's unfortunate its location. We are really nestled in a lot of busyness, which I think is detracting a little bit from the strength of the story. And, barring bringing a weed whacker and the bird's just going to stay there for you. And, obviously there's nothing you can do about this. You're kind of at the liberty of this bird in this particular location. I wonder if catching it before it brought it into the reeds was the answer, or did you stumble upon it after that was already done? And then that kind of really works against you in competitive format. We even have these out of focus reeds here that are kind of coming across the front. 7.
Double treat pier.
I think the composition works very nicely. The exposure, I assume you're trying to go to that high key, low key look, because all this that's blown out in the water down in the bottom part of the frame, is not my favorite. But if you're going for high key, low key, I think you've got a nice amount of detail in the curl of the wave here. So it works for me. And you look at your yellows, you've got a little bit of a halo that follows you around your yellows against your silhouette. I'm not sure I understand why that is like that. 7.
What's up, down?
Compositionally, you keep my attention exactly where you want it to be. I think your angle of view is also interesting, seeing the top of the cut stem there. We have a background that is in different light than our main subject. Here we're in direct sunlight, and you can see we get a little bright along the edge, bright along there. and then super bright right there. You know, like, why is this ground down here so much brighter than the rest of the ground? Or this looks like it's been toned down. And when we did, we've given it more of a yellowy orange look than anything else. So we have to look at selecting that and maybe decreasing some of the orange there. And then if you're going to do it there, you have to do the equivalent here, because now the spot down here really jumps out at you. It's the brightest part of the frame. It really stands out. Not in the scoring. My suggestion is to use a little, I love your border, the border size. I think you compete a little bit for attention with the color of the flower, looking at the border, just the white border, just to let the viewer know where you stand. 6.
Figure ground, cello back and cabinet side.
So the curl of the side of the cello is really very nice. The simplicity of one shape versus the other shapes that are created, like, you know, you've got a shape here in dark that's created. You've got, of course, everything that you could see here. And then you've got a broad area that's going on over here with not much going on. It does get a little bright up in the top, which draws my attention away. I kind of question the reason for that. What's got almost nothing going on and is of the least amount of interest is what occupies 50% of the frame. That's that right side. You know, would I compose this a little differently or with a different background? Perhaps not. I still think it's a pleasing image. 7.
Where have you been?
Well, it tells a very nice story. You know, the dirtiness of the hand, the clothing, the repair of the clothing, I think all adds to this very rough life, this primitive light source that's on a diagonal. I like the position of the hand, the frame. I think you processed it well. 7.
Rosebud.
So for this particular image, I think you have a very nice color palette. You've elected to keep me sort of in with a vignette, with a soft, diffuse vignette, almost present it like it's a selective focus type of image. But you know what is not so vignetted is this, what's right here. And that is kind of one big section of pink with very little going on, a couple little, you know, little vertical veins here. Other than that, I just don't feel the angle of view is warranting this vignette to keep me focused into an area that has almost the least amount going on throughout the whole image. 6.
Badhistava.
I find your composition well thought out. You definitely lead me from the perimeter of this frame into the image very well. You have something of interest that you lead my eye to. Your use of exposure between the candelabras to the natural light coming through between some of the pillars and on the ground to the shaded areas is very well balanced. So good job with that. 7.
Mini car tow.
I think it's a very cute story. I feel that the composition makes it difficult at first to even understand what's going on. But what is the strength of the image? Is it just the little car against the big truck? If that's the case, the car's kind of small here, the truck's right there. And then you have all of this, which really, I think your perspective is between the Jeep and the back of the tow truck. What about these leading lines that are here? I mean, leading us in, having this pit more against that, I think would be stronger than kind of breaking this up into a left side of the frame, right side of the frame, with the right side of the frame not adding quite as much strength. Probably a little bit more on the base to let you know you're on a platform. Honestly, you look at it for a couple of minutes before you kind of figure out what's going on. 6.
Macau showing its best side.
So you've done a very nice job with your exposure here. Your choice of selective focus, making the background be blurred out of focus. I should say not selective focus, but depth of field definitely brings more attention to the bird. I don't need to see the bottom of the tail. I think you've cropped it in a very pleasing place. And I think your processing is fairly well done. We're probably have a little bit of a blue color cast to the image, but we're pretty fairly well done. This is white, and there's so many ways easily to make that white, which would make the other colors pop more. In Lightroom, you've got the eyedropper tool you could select on. In Photoshop, there's tools. I like to use the NIX software, and Color Effects Pro does this really simple for me, just clicking on it with their eyedropper, boom. But the one thing I want to mention is head and eye position is very important. Is there a reason to have the bird slightly looking away from me? I think a true profile, anything less than that to straight to me, any one of those would work better than the bird starting to look away, trying to make me want to get away from the bird and look out of the frame. So I'm sure you have multiple images of this. Definitely if you're going to blow one up, I would get one where the bird's head is positioned not a little bit away, but it's still an awesome image. 7.
Lord at the playground.
So this particular image, I feel, has a lot of strength. One, the maker has kept my eye exactly where you want it. A sense of environment, but definitely on the child. I think the pose of the child works out great. Your exposure throughout is really well handled. You did darken back in here for your final exposure, and I think you've done a decent job with it. Something maybe a little weird right in here, but it's so small, we're letting that pass. When you darken something, keep in mind that sometimes it loses contrast. You got to add a little contrast back, because the amount of contrast everywhere else is different, and it gets a little flat in contrast in here, and in here. So add a little contrast back to those little particular areas. Everything kind of leads me in. I'm so glad that I don't see you standing here in reflection. You're starting to get a reflection of the child right here. Could you position yourself to give a little bit more to that? Not that you have to. I would give it some thought process. This is a great image. 7.
You got room for me?
Well, we've got some beautiful light on this scene. The elephant's ears, and the fact that the elephant's looking at me is pretty cool. I would say if the story is really the people with this massive elephant in front of it, let's look at the people. He's not paying attention. He's looking that way. He's not paying attention. All right. This person's looking over here toward us. You know, I mean, if you have more frames, I think something where it would add strength to the story by seeing more of an enthrallment of what they're actually viewing. You know, this person's camera binoculars are down. Still beautiful light. Be careful with your exposure. You're a little blown out in certain areas. So definitely look at your histogram. 7.
The lion in winter.
A lot of attention to your composition here. Your spacing here, 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 well handled. The use of diagonal and how it competes with the verticals, I think adds very nice geometry to your image. You've done a nice job of exposure. You've processed this in a way that it becomes more high key and low key. And that really brings a lot of attention to the lion, and it makes the environment actually look kind of cool the way it stands out against the lion. So I do like what you've done right there. 7.
Vestibule.
So listen, you've got, once again, a lot of attention to your composition. This is not a matter of pointing the camera and taking a picture. This is somebody who's doing a lot of thought process. Let's talk about your edges. You're going to have a nice space. You're going to lead me up and in, a nice space over here, a nice framing on the top, you know, with a little space right there. You're not even bringing that to the edge. You've got enough space to get me into the secondary room. I think you've done an excellent job of balancing your dark tones and your light tones here. Your use of the vignette on the top and the right side of the frame also helps to push my eye in and through this image. This is a fabulous composition and a really awesome process. 5. All right, 7. I just gotta make sure you're awake.
Yeah. Okay. Tulip impression.
You know, I find very interesting the textures that you've created in this image. We have a color palette that is really fairly similar between main subject and background, and I think it works really well. The change between the you know, the yellows and the oranges are great. The fact that the only real pinkish reds are within the flower itself. You start to dabble close in certain areas in your background, but you stay away enough that my attention clearly stays on the flower. My only thing I would question is taking the background layer over the stem right here, you know, twice. Do you like it or do you not like it? I do think that's very subjective, which is going to help you. The diagonal nature of the tulip also adds a lot of strength to your composition. 7.
Tulip ladies.
You've done a very nice job in your exposure for this image. I would say, I think this is a very nice image of these two people. In a competition, are we getting creative with our models? Or do we have two people that are smiling, say, let me take your picture, and they're smiling for the camera? I think it's a nice picture for a sense of place, but on a competition level, I think we need to get some kind of an expression, some kind of mood created that draws me into the image. Would I clip the side of this person's hat, or would I include their head? You know, we've got it out space on that side. 6.
An iguana of a different color.
So your composition, I think, works very nicely. I think you've got it framed very well, spacing between the leaves, the twigs, top to bottom. You know, I just feel like your processing has, we're not really clear. And perhaps that's not the look you're looking for. You're trying to delve into the abstract, which is fine. But in doing so, we've created so much so much contrast, that I think it starts to struggle. I still like this enough to see this again, 7.
Who said the Woodstock?
You've depressed the shutter at a great point in time. I love the mouth position. This particular image is shot in a location where it is definitely a lot going on. You can't really isolate the woodstock as much as would be beneficial. And with that being said, we've got these branches that are coming in. Look at this, is kind of coming up and this is coming down. And do these help your composition, or do they hurt your composition? Could you simplify? And I'm going to tell you that if you wanted to take this image right here where you are right now, you can absolutely make this have more strength. And I'm going to talk about 2 ways you could do that. The first is when you take your picture, obviously you can't probably move left or right without having the same scenario, probably a worse scenario. So I would keep separation between the little tip of the beak right there and that branch, between this and the mandible. All right, between this heaviness and these feathers. With that being said, I can easily in Photoshop select those and clone them out, content to where fill them out, spot healing tool them out, different layer them out, whatever you want to do. And now you've got a much cleaner image. The next thing is exposure. Light is coming in from a very unfavorable direction, and it's pretty harsh. It's coming down, and so we're there a little bit late in the morning or too early in the afternoon. With that being said, could you make it look better? You still can, and here's what I would do. I would expose for the whites so they are just shy the right side. How do you do that? So you say you don't know how to shoot in manual mode. You take this particular image and whatever, say you're shooting it in aperture priority. Could be any one of the program modes. And say in aperture priority, you come out with 1,000th of a second at f8. All right. Now you got your histogram and you're looking at it, and your histogram is riding up the right side a little bit, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're riding up the right side a little bit. So you want to move your histogram to the left. You want to decrease your exposure. So I forgot what I said. Say it's 1,000 at f8. I want to keep that fast shutter speed. Maybe I'll go to f9. Take another picture. And with that being said, once my white stops short, just right around there on my histogram, then I know where I'm going to be. So now I've got these dark tones that don't have a lot of detail. So what am I going to do? Fill flash down on full power. What power would I put it on? Well, the brightest tone is always going to dictate your flash power. Because you have so much white, it's -1 2/3. And then you're still not going to get everything in the dark tones, which is fine. You don't need it. But here you've opened up with shadows over here. Look how flat we got up underneath my colors. That would look much better. 6.
A garden swing.
Overall, a really nice feel to this image. I like the offset nature of the swing. I like the more dominance to the top part of the rope. Then you've got your swing and then a nice smaller landing. I think that you broke this up into 3/4 on the top, 1/4 on the bottom. Is more dynamic to your composition. On the same token, your swing is leaning to the left. You left more space on the left. I think all that works very nicely. You've done a great job of exposure on the brighter and the darker areas of the brick wall in the background. I would say that we may be a little bit harsh in contrast in here. Your pinks are suspended in darkness. So shadows, highlights, a little less contrast, and you can definitely punch that out a little bit. 7.
Reflection.
Before anything, you've got a cool effect going over here right now, which really is competing with your thin border. I strongly recommend you don't do that. Let your image speak for itself. I like setting the lamp off to one side. I think the interplay between these thicker swirls here are really cool against what happens there. And I think that also stands out nicely against the little thin lines of yellow that happen in the lampshade themselves. May or may not consider taking a little bit off the bottom. The last thing I would ask is, would I separate, we're kind of tight in here with the vertical part of the mirror frame and the vertical part of the center part of the lamp. Would I separate them a little bit by perhaps taking a step to the right? I think that might be helpful. If I'm going to show the reflection of the lampshade in the mirror, would I give it a little bit more dominance? So would I stand so I either eliminate it or I got more at an angle and I could see more of it? Because right now it almost looks like, it just doesn't quite look like it belongs to me. Seven.
Austrian village setting.
Very pleasing image. I like where you've elected to crop it. Enough space for an anchor on the bottom, enough space over here, enough space on the top. The separation of the handlebar and the cluster of flowers is very nice. I think you've selected a filter that's given this a very nice overall feel to it. Little nitpicking thing in my world, and it doesn't come into the scoring in your world, is we've got this rock that comes down, touch the edge, and then it comes up. I'd probably leave a little space for it. This little dark stain on the ground over there, I would clone that out. I don't think it really, it's some kind of debris. I don't think it adds strength to the image. Would I or would I not include a little bit more of the head of the gears? Again, these are all things that are just not in the scoring, food for thought. 7.
Tulip parrot.
So I like your tulip. I like what's happening within the tulip itself. We've got some cool things because of your angle of view. I don't know that it has as much strength. It becomes a little bit static in its composition, being more of a horizontal. Here we've got the purple that kind of just the very edge bleeds over the stem. Your edges between your background and your tulip they differ throughout the frame. I don't know if there's a purpose for that. The next thing is your choice of color palette. Does the purple really go so well with the yellow and the more almost magenta? And I guess that's something you can argue. I kind of think that the choice is struggling a little bit. 6.
Can't wait to eat breakfast.
It tells a very nice story. It's always great to see something with prey. It's it adds some more visual impact and storytelling ability to your image. Not that it's necessary, but it's great. Couple things about the image. Of course, this image is really devoid of detail. Some of it's because of contrast, but a lot of it is because of whatever happened between capture and final product, is making it look that way. I think this image is too busy to be abstract this way. I can't even really tell what the prey is. I can't separate it from the beak of the Roadrunner. We're blown out whites in these bottom corners, so be careful of that. The next thing is angle of view. Shooting down on it like this does not give it its grandeur. Stuff like this on the ground, I mean, chin on the ground, if you can lay down, if you're physically able to, lay down, shoot this eye level, and you will definitely enjoy your angle of view much better. 6.
Focused attention.
Okay. She's been impaled up her nostril by this right here. So listen, I want to say that right away because I noticed it immediately. I'm not trying to start with the negative, but right away, I'm looking at this, and the only thing in the background that is pretty much not blurred is the one thing that's going right up her other nostril. So unless, Dracula's been here before, when do you press the shutter? When the person is a little more to one side or the other, I think would be helpful. I do like what you're doing here, but I just struggle with that right out of the gate. You've done a great job with exposure. I think you're making your subject stand out nice against your background. I just think that, you've even blurred it everywhere else except for where it's going up her nose. So I'm going to go with a 6. I just made somebody mad, I'm sure.
Curious iguana.
Nice, good processing. The inclusion of the leaves on the top gives strength to the sense of place. You're definitely low here. Are you super low? No. Do you need to be super low? No. I think by not getting super low, you're able to see the feet. If you got lower, these leaves would probably block the feet. So, it's nice. Would I not clip just 2 toes here and show a little bit more of the foot right there? Personally, I would, but you have the space in the front to swing your camera a little bit, but I still think you did an awesome job here. So listen, one little nitpicking thing in Phil Echo's world, look at the leaves. They're pretty kind of even throughout the image in lighting. Little spots are a little bit brighter, but not super bright, except for that right there. I'm going to take it away, and it's toward an edge. Would I get rid of that? That's an easy fix clone. I'd even just crop it. I don't think you even need that little section over there. Just stuff to think about. 7.
2 heads are better than 1.
You've got some very pleasing lighting in this. You've done a nice job with your exposure. You've done a nice job in your processing in regards to color, use of white point, black point, and it all works well. We've got the 2 heads off more to one side, showing a little bit more of the dominance of the flowers. So with that being said, if the flowers are going to be the dominant thing on the side that is going to allow you to take those 2 heads off center, what part of the flower stand out more than any other section of the flower? And I think the 2 yellow ones are definitely a good answer. And then we're clipping the edge of the right one. So these are little details that on a tripod, we could talk to ourselves and really take the time to look around and say, okay, those yellow flowers kind of really stand out compared to all the rest of the flowers. Would I want to clip it at the edge, or would I want to include it? Would I want to get on a little bit more of a diagonal nature and include a little more of the flowers? That's your choice. Would I want to make this come so close to the bottom edge that it's clipping? Again, your choice. 7.
Natural form.
I really like your composition. I think it's awesome. I think your choice of background is awesome. I not so sure that I like the fact that I don't think we really, we're definitely soft in detail in here. So would I like to see some more, sharper edges in here and then maybe lose it everywhere else? Would it make that stand out a little bit more? Or is there a reason for the whole thing to be so soft and focused? Obviously, in your mind, you're seeing that. And I apologize, but for me, I'd like to see a little, I think that would stand out even better if at least you had some detail there. You have a little bit of your edges. You're something weird going on with your edges. How it's kind of like bright, kind of nice and easy around it, and the same thing on both sides. So if you've darkened or changed the background, are we taking it close enough? I'm 6.
King court tulip.
So your angle on the tulip, I think, is well handled. I think you've got interest throughout. On your processing, we're blown out in some of your highlight areas. You have a tulip that is in two different being lit by diffused light as well as direct sunlight, some parts of it. So it's becoming difficult for your sensor once again. Have someone stand and block your light might be helpful, or multiple exposure or more shadows and highlight work. I also think we could define our edges a little bit more by adding a little more contrast in the tulip. The tulip is totally suspended in the middle of this background. I guess you can argue whether you kind of like that presentation or not. 6.
Looking up.
Okay. Angle of view is pretty cool. I like what's happening in the buildings. I like how they're converging and leading me in. I think you have a pleasing sky. I'm going to ask what parts of the building are really cool. We have a couple of signs that break up the monotony of the buildings themselves, because honestly, all these buildings are fairly similar in color, pattern, and texture. Not exactly, but you see a drastic contrast between that, this, and then everything in here. So the one thing about the everything in here are the signs, and would I add a little space more on the bottom there? Would I include the rest of these 2 letters? I don't know. I play around with it. I would think about it. Would I include something new at the top right corner that just starts to take an identity, or would I crop this in such a way that I would not have that? Would I also walk around a little bit more to get a little bit more separation between the new and the old construction? Would that add a little bit more interest? You do have a separation here, which helps. So something else I would think about. Again, the one thing that stands out more than anything is probably the neon blue right here. It's rated an edge, taking me out. 6.
Okay. Round 2, we have 18.
Sounds good.
Okay, here we go. Aldabra tortoise.
8.
Having a snack in the bushes.
7.
Double tree pier.
7.
Figure ground cello, back and cabinet side.
Very subjective. 8.
Where have you been?
9.
Bod Histava.
8.
Macau showing its best side.
8.
Board at the playground.
9.
You got room for me.
8.
The lion in winter.
9.
Vestibule.
You say vegetables?
Vestibule.
I'm messing with
That's okay, Phil.
you. You said it right. I just teased you. 9.
Tulip impression.
8.
An iguana of a different color.
7.
A garden swing.
8.
Reflection.
8.
Austrian village setting.
9.
Curious iguana.
9.
2 heads are better than 1.
8.
Okay. Here we're going to have first, second, and third, and the rest, because there are only 3, will be honorable mention.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Where have you been? Board at the playground. The lion in winter. Vestibule. Austrian village setting. And curious iguana.
Okay. Can we go a little slower now?
Sure.
I go to the next one. Thank you. And the next one. And the next one. And the next one. And the next one. Okay. Could you tell me which one is Rich Grossberg's? Number one is going to be the ancient looking staircase.
Okay, that's this one.
Yes.
Okay.
Number two is going to be the hand with the lantern.
Okay.
I'm glad you didn't say this one, because then I would have been all over you. Number three. So, it becomes so hard to separate so dissimilar images. I really like quite a few of these images very much. Well, I like them all very much. I did make a comment about that iguana, and I did make a comment about the contrast in the little girl. I'm going to go with the bike. I think that a little gum stain on the ground is as insignificant as you can get. Just so you know, Rich's mustache is a clip-on. It's not real.
Okay, you ready?
Oh, payback is a bitch.
Okay, honorable mention, group 2. Bored at the playground, Mario. He's not here tonight, but it's still a beautiful picture. The Lion in Winter, Bobby. Once again, really nice. And Curious Iguana, Sandy. Nice, really nice. Third place, Austrian village setting, Dan. Once again, way to go. Second place, Where Have You Been? Dan again. What a shock. Really great. And first place, guess who? Dan Vesterbrook. Terrific, guys. Okay, now we're going to go into the theme water, and we have 16 in the group 1 contest.
Okay.
Cliffs of Moher.
Compositionally, your use of perspective is nice. You've got your foreground, and then you've got a nice leading line that takes me through. Your processing is got this in such a way that, the whites and the waters are blown out. We don't really have good detail anywhere in the frame. Your sky is very unnatural looking. If you're going for that more abstract look, it becomes more of a kind of go through the image like that, like Zorro. And I think it will look better with detail than it does looking a little more abstract. If your theme is water, where the peak of the water actually comes out is totally blown out. 6.
Fun at the lake.
So on one hand, compositionally, I think that you've got enough spacing on the top, which is great to get into the sky layer if that's what you want to do. You've got your people that are kind of offset a little bit, so they're not in the middle of the frame, which I think works very well. I'm going to ask some questions. One is, what is the image of? Is the image of the scene and the children are an accessory piece? Or is it the image of these kids having fun at this location? Because if it's the kids having fun at this location, the 2 kids are blocked out. I can't even see the second child. I can't really see a strong interaction between them. And, the little water that they're kicking up is merging with the bottom of the frame. The middle part of the image has the least amount of interest and it occupies a lot of space. What can I do about that? Well, if you want to show this much of the environment, if you just, same focal length, just got lower, you would eliminate a lot of the middle ground. You would make the kids look more dominant. You could still show the same amount of sky. Would I wait or move left or right, or wait till the kids change their direction a little bit so I can get a better feel what's the interaction between the two of them? I think that would be helpful also. 6.
Stratified falls.
You know, overall, this image has a very nice feel to it. You've elected to give more dominance to the tree line than you did the water on the bottom, and that's your choice. For me, this is a picture, never mind the title of your category, but it's about the water. I probably would have gave more space to the water because it's so unusual looking with that blue. I might even shoot this as a square format because I also like the inclusion of the trees at the top. Something to think about. You've also elected to use a shutter speed that is extremely slow. And although the anatomy of what's happening in the water is really very cool, would it look a little better with a little bit more detail? Definitely not a sharp shutter speed. What shutter speed would I say for a starting point would probably be a 25th of a second would be a starting point, and then play from there. 7.
Iceberg.
So as we spend more and more length of time photographing, I think more questions should be coming into our mind. I think you present this iceberg nicely. It's evenly placed in the frame. It's exposed well. It becomes kind of a static horizontal right in the frame without really showing me a lot else that's going on. You're probably in a boat. Ask the captain for the life preserver. Have somebody hold a nice towel and get in the water. Change your perspective. No, seriously, I'm only joking about that. But, you know, you may want to include a little bit of the background. So it's not just kind of this, you know, shallow perspective, just one iceberg coming across the middle. I think you've done a nice enough job to get you a 7 right now on presenting this iceberg. But something to think about as we move through this, this vision of photography that we're all working in.
Flying low.
Very nice choice in shutter speed. Tells the action very, very nicely. You know, your lighting's coming in on a side lighting, and I think you've done a very nice job of exposing for it. Enough detail in the dark tones. I like to see the interaction of the harness, and I can. You know, the intense look of you know, the kite border looking forward. You didn't blow out your whites. 7.
Don't get splashed.
Okay, so you've got a very good job with exposure in this image, and you've got some beautiful lighting on it, and you've handled it really well. I'm going to ask, what is the intent of this location? And what was the intent of your image? So this location's intent is for children to have fun. All right. So we have this kid over here, and I can't really see what he's doing, and this child over here, and are we maximizing their position? Well, you know, this bucket, I would assume, fills up and spills. If it does, that's your point in time to take this picture. If not, maybe changing your angle of view, because you know, we're kind of, you know, flow me in and right and through, and I don't get a good interaction with the kids. I'd work on that a little bit more. How cool would this be, though, if Mark was wearing a Speedo and he was standing right here, and all the water was hitting him in the head. But if one of these is your kid, you know, that may be something. This water's not coming down that hard. That would be a really cool picture. 7.
Icicle.
Beautiful light. Great job in your exposure. I love the simplicity of your composition. I do think your 2 icicles are sharper in focus. You're getting a little soft in focus up here. Do you need it or do you not need it? Your choice. I think it's fine the way it is. I kind of think it's really cool seeing the frozen ice on here and in here. Now, as you use a longer focal length and zoom out, your depth of field at any given aperture is going to become shallower and shallower. So, you know, something like this, I would say you're probably looking at over 300 millimeters, unless you have a really low gutter. So, you know, I would try to get this up to like F16 if I could, to get everything in focus. Still very nice, 7.
Barbados fishing fleet.
All right, very nice overall scene. Let's spend a few seconds talking about where our compositional elements are. I would say your primary focus is the boats. And that's why you took this section of beach versus the one that's adjacent to it. I don't know, I'm not standing there, but I would guess that. You have a cool sky. How is the sand? Does the sand add a lot of good interest? And it's only in one corner? Well, it's all right. We have a little dark area right there that I'm not a huge fan of. We have something bright at the edge on the left. Do I like that, or would I eliminate that? Okay, I would definitely eliminate that by positioning, cropping, something like that. Angle of view. We're shooting down on the boats. Would this image look cooler if I was super low, closer to the water's edge? I would bring great detail to some of these small structures in the sand and give them a good dominant look. That would make them present a whole lot better than that little tight, fine little nitpicking detail of contrast that we see right now. I would bring this water to life by getting close to the water's edge and getting low to the ground. I would make the boats look more dominant. I could still include all that sky. That change of perspective would look super duper cool. The next thing is exposure. You know, we have to expose for the whites if they're a strong part of the story. I think the breaking wave that curls all the way through is a strong part of the story, and it's totally blown out. And then you have all these dark areas that are also blown out. So if you decrease the exposure for those whites, you're going to have nothing in the darks. So what do? Well, these boats are moving. So doing 2 exposures is not probably the answer. But if this is where you're on vacation, if this is a spot that you're passing through right now just to see and you're gone, it is what it is. If this is very close to your hotel and this is the scene that you like for prime light, then you're back at prime light when light's your friend. 6.
Fountain.
So, you know, the explosive nature of the fountain is pretty cool. Its position, the frame is pretty cool. Again, if you're going to have little things that are going to dabble into the frame and dabble out, you have to ask yourself, should I show more of them or eliminate them? Are they adding a sense of purpose or story? 2 things about this image that I think would be helpful. One is to give the water some anatomy. And I think it's lacking anatomy for one thing for sure. And that is, nothing is really in focus in this image, whether it's the water, the vegetation in the foreground, the vegetation rock face in the background, edges of anything. Nothing's really in focus. That's probably more than anything. And then choice of shutter speed may or may not be a second part of that. I'm not so sure because of what I see here. I think it's more a focus issue. 6.
Winds at their back.
So, once again, I think you're onto something great here. I'm going to ask some questions. Here are my questions. What are my points of interest and how are they in the frame? Could I give more dominance to one versus the other? The sail is pretty cool. So are the people. What's nice is the wide angle perspective of the hands kind of taking me in. And if that's what you want to do, would I consider getting lower, maybe getting closer to the hands, making these people bigger, taking away this buoy coming out of this woman's head, it's spearing her in the head. She's going to go to the same doctor as the woman with the post in her nostril. This is how I make enemies. But those are the kind of things I'm going to think about. I don't like this, but if you got lower, she would block that out totally for you. You wouldn't even have to go move it. And if you got lower, you see more of the sky and more of the sail. It would look really cool. The next thing is, who's this person taking a picture of? The person who's just on the edge of the frame coming in or out? Do you want two stories here? These two people having their drink and this person taking a picture of, their friend. If it is, I swing the camera wide or I swing it to the left. I mean, you answer the question on what it is you'd like. Seven.
Hold on, I got it. Happens sometimes when it gets hung. Probably gonna have to go back into it. Car window in car wash.
Overall, it says a nice presentation. I am going to ask myself questions because I got to tell you, I talk to myself constantly when I'm preparing to take a picture. And I'm going to say, the suds on the glass look great. The background works very nicely with it. Is there a pattern in the suds that really takes on a great identity? Well, I think this T here, I'm going to call it that, is really cool. And would I not have it all the way to the side? Would I, have a little more space on the left and on the bottom of it and on the top of it to include it? I think that this cluster of that right there is really cool. Now we're getting into something new that's big and is at the edge. Is that really cool? Or would I just kind of crop my image? That's a terrible straight line, but somewhere in that vicinity, to work with that. You have to look at your background. Your background is hot and blown out right there on the left. Could you reposition yourself in such a way that you eliminate that? If not, in post-processing, you can do it. You do it also, but you're going to spend a little bit of time to make it not look like it was done. But I like your thought process. 7.
Quite a splash.
Yeah, good choice in shutter speed, good point in time. Lighting is okay. It's not dynamite, but it's okay. One of the things, let me ask another question, because listen, who cares how I score images tonight? You're getting one person's opinion. Who really cares what Phil Echo says? You're shooting for yourself. But Phil Echo wants to make you think so that you could decide what you think is the best for you and your taste. So you took this picture with the water spraying up like that to show how big and high it can get, right? You waited till it was at its peak moment and you chose the actual frame of all the frames where the water is kind of like at its bang, its biggest impact, right? Given its size and grandeur. I'd say that I bet you I'm right on that thought process. And with that being said, would it look even higher and bigger if you got lower? Would the top of the water line stop with the horizon line, except for the little tiny peak right there and a little bit of right here? They wouldn't be merging together. The higher this would look, wouldn't it look cool if the water was even higher? It would present twice as high if you were kneeling down or squatting down low. Because really, it's not this that's so cool. It's this that's so cool. Make it look bigger and with more strength. 7.
Sunrise on the lake.
The color is beautiful. I think the position, the frame is nice. You know, one of the things I like is that you gave more dominance to the water because the sky, once you get above, oh, I didn't mean to make that line. Once you get above here, and I wish that was straighter, it's really not that interesting. I'd even crop a little bit of it off, but you don't have to. I think the space on the water was a very good choice. The next thing is, I'd love to have a glass of wine, but I never have it until I'm done photographing because otherwise my pictures get crooked like this. I feel like I'm almost in the Joker's lair here in Batman. You know, try to level your images. If you can't get it when you're capturing it, this is an easy fix in the software post-processing. I don't see a purpose for it to be, you know, tilted like this. 7.
Bobbing about.
I think you should have like 10 pictures of Bobby Greenfield here. Then it could be Bob and Bobby's, right? And that would look really cool. You know, I think it tells a great story. I do feel like we're not only centering them in the frame, so we've got a lot of dead space on the sides, which is kind of making, you know, these little chicks disappear into the overall pattern of the water. Lighting is not coming in from a pleasing angle. You know, so could you do something about that? I don't know. I haven't been there. And is shooting down on them really giving them their due in stature? 6.
Plainsboro Preserve.
So there's quite a few things I like about the image. I think you've got a good anchor point here, right here. Same thing here. You lead me in. I like the spacing on your dominant tree right here to the left of it. Yeah, I like your spacing over here. Your sky is probably going to be very difficult to get your exposure right unless you do multiple exposures. So you've practically eliminated it. So that's a good thought process too. We are a little shy, a little heavy in the contrast. We're not getting good detail in here. And I have to ask why, because nothing is moving except for possibly, your camera, which I don't think is moving. So, why do we not have good detail everywhere else? I do think you've chosen a pretty good depth of field. So why still do we not have good edges? I would definitely delve into that a little bit and see if you can help yourself. But it's a strong composition. Let's see it again in this group. 7.
Waterfalls.
The different cascades, the anchor point here, this plays very nicely against your main cascade. I think you take me in through the image very nicely. Am I in love with the inclusion of that little bit right there? I don't think you need it. Clone from anywhere, and put it right there. Clone from here and put it there. You do whatever you want to do, but I would eliminate that. I know you probably can't get out any further, but that's an easy fix. I look and I say, we're very heavy in contrast in here. Look in your dark tones. You're not really getting a whole lot. I would open up the shadows a little bit more. 6.
Excuse me, Phil, we're not seeing the red of your
It
pen.
disappeared?
Yes.
All right, I'm sorry. I can still see it on my end. I'll try to
Oh,
pick another tool and then go back to the draw
thank you.
and do it again. And let me know next time it comes up if it shows.
Okay, round 2, we have 10 in here, so.
Okay.
Water group 1. Stratified falls.
Nine.
Iceberg.
Seven.
Flying low.
9.
Don't get splashed.
8.
Icicle.
8.
Wind at their back.
7.
Car window in car wash.
8.
Quite a splash.
8,
Sunrise on the lake.
9,
Plainsboro Preserve.
7.
Okay.
Okay, so, for me, I like all three of these images. There were little things that I talked about each one. I think if your subject and assigned subject is water, I think the waterfall picture is more about the water than any of the other images. So the waterfall is number 1. I think the next thing that the sense of water, you can make a strong argument on both of the next two. I'm gonna go with this one,
Which
The-
one?
kite border.
What's that?
Kite border.
This one?
No, the kite border.
Oh, kite. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay, group 1, 3rd place, Sunrise on the Lake, Claude. Beautiful job, Claude. 2nd place, Flying Low, Jerry, once again. Wish she was here to see these. And the 1st place, Jack, excellent. Okay, now for our last contest. And here we have 25. Water group 2. Track of a hunting anhinga.
For this particular competition, I do like the fact that we've got a lot of space for the water track. I think, you can make that happen. If your topic is about the water. I just don't think that we're really in focus throughout this image. We're very, very devoid of good detail anywhere or moderate detail anywhere. 6.
Sunken Meadows, Long Island.
The accent piece of the bird with its wings open is pretty cool. It adds a nice sense of perspective in this overall scene. So listen, we have a scene that we're really devoid of a lot of detail in the darker tones here. And we're a little bright in a lot of the upper tones there. I get a different sense for this particular image where I'm not really necessarily looking for that. I think this is more the anatomy of what's going on a broader scale than on a finer scale. I would probably try to eliminate. Can you see that the red now, is it showing up or no? On
Yes.
the upper left, I'd probably try
Yes,
to
it
eliminate
is.
that. It doesn't really help much. 7.
Water art.
It has a very pleasing feel to it. I'm going to ask: is there a pattern, a color swatch in the greens or blues that takes an identity, and where is it positioned in the frame? Subtly, yes. You've got this larger one right here at the junction almost of the thirds vertically and horizontally. It's subtle. The rest, we have a lot going on. I still think that this presents nicely. 7.
Water dropping on ice.
The shutter speed, the splash, all that is really, really cool. I love the little highlight that happens on some of the droplets. We've got these dark areas that are on the probably the background, I would assume, that I think are competing for a little attention with your actual water droplets. They may be shadows, or I don't know, but I think they compete a little bit. I just feel the balance of this image is a little bit off. We've got, 40% of the frame on the bottom of this, that I think is detracting from attention from what's really happening in the explosion of the ice. In the background, we're starting to get a little different something coming in on the right side. I think getting in tighter would be helpful. 6.
Atlantic Ocean vista.
Oh, I know whose picture this is. It doesn't matter, Sandy. I never vote up or down anybody based on whether I like them or not, or know them or not, or anything like that. I think it's got some strength to it. You're kind of leading me in and through the picture. You're committing more space to the sky, and that's fine. I do think you have an interesting sky. I will ask, where are the people in the frame? All right. We have one guy that's here. Would he look better in the middle where you can kind of see him, or would you merge him with those benches? We've got 3 girls in bikinis. Who doesn't want to see girls in bikinis? They're all the way at the edge. I think pressing the shutter when the main thing are these guys, this guy would be in the middle, I think it would add some more strength. We have the inclusion of someone else checking out their cell phone at an edge. Would I clone them out? So you do have to look through all aspects of your viewfinder while you're composing, and then when you're processing. Another little thing, take a look at that little dark sand bleb right there at the bottom. Does that help, or is that something that kind of stands out, takes on an identity? 6.
The actual bridge on the River Kwai.
I love where you've stood. Your diagonal taking me prospectively through this image, where you spaced it on that side, the fact that someone with an umbrella is in the clearing between the 2 big steel pieces coming down is a cool place to put them. The fact that you've got the inclusion of one person out taking a picture, standing out there, also adds something really cool to the picture. You've elected to process this in sort of this old world feel, which is fine. I do think we could probably tone down a couple things a little bit, because, really, where do you want your attention to go? To that part of the bridge or to a different part of the bridge? So I'd probably just work on my balance there a little bit. It is an image that becomes a little bit more difficult to appreciate in this sepia, if you want to call it that, than it would in color. And that's because you have very tight textures in your steel girders, very tight textures in your concrete. You have tight textures in your water, and extremely tight textures in the trees and the grasses. And since they're all the same color, it makes this image a little bit more difficult to follow than you would otherwise. In color, I think things would stand out a little bit better. And then you got, of course, the little branches over there, which we're going to ignore, that are coming in. 7.
Blue ice.
The pieces of ice floating in the water do add a pretty interesting foreground element. I think that you've cropped this in a way that you've got interest that takes me into the frame. A couple of things. One is, are we level? And I don't think we're level in this image. So that, that's one thing. The next is, could we bring out some more detail, especially in certain areas? In our icebergs, they're overexposed, verge of overexposed. Sky is very bright. I love to use Vivesa, and it makes it real easy. With Vivesa, I can click here, make a circle that's bigger, and then I can go ahead and decrease the exposure just in the sky. I can then add some contrast and some structure. And I'm going to tell you, that sky is going to pop out. And if some of that bleeds over onto the snow-capped mountain and I don't want it to be there, I'll just get my eraser tool with a soft edge and just kind of brush over this. And then next thing you know, you got that. Then the other thing is, could you make these light greens and these whites come to life a lot more, even in the water? And the answer is yes. In levels, you can make that pop a whole lot more. So some help in processing, I think you could turn this into a higher scoring image without a doubt. 6.
Dancing waters.
All right, beautiful light. You know, what really makes this so spectacular to me is how the water stands up against that dark background, right? Look at all of that, right? How cool is that? So let me ask you a question. How cool is it down in here, where you struggle to see where the water's coming from? Doesn't kill your image. But if this is what's really the strength of the image, as low as you possibly can. You could put probably one tripod leg in the water and get super low, or you could be on the railing that's along the edge and get super low and use the railing as your tripod, or use your tripod right behind the railing. Wear a snorkel and sit in the water. But whatever I would do is I would get lower so that I would have more of this against the dark background as much as possible. It would be great to see its origination point. 7.
Wednesday wash day in Venice.
Color is great. You've elected to make this abstract looking. You know, we don't have the fine detail. You know, this might be Murano, it doesn't matter. But you've elected to really punch out your colors. You might have changed your colors. I don't know. I like the final product on what you've done. I would argue 2 things in the composition. And the first one is, do I like the tree right in the middle that kind of separates this into a right and left half of the image that are almost mirror in concept, but not in what's actually happening? Do I like the clothesline that's the brightest thing in the image at the edge that leads me out of the frame? Or would I change my position to be on more of a diagonal and change 1 or 2 or whatever of those things? Something to think about. 7.
Following the flow.
So in this particular image, I do like your choice of a vertical format. I think that is interesting. I'm going to ask myself questions about all aspects of the frame. Has the foreground? It's all right. Has the middle ground? Pretty cool. Has the background? All right. I don't think the background is that relevant, so I don't have a problem with it. With that being said, this big whatever it is under the water that's taking on an identity, does it deserve a much more dominant identity than these fountains? I would argue no. I don't even know what it is. So I would consider getting lower, zooming in, maybe even taking it on a diagonal so all these don't fall into on top of each other. Did we really make the water white? Is this water really taking on its identity? In levels, if you look at this image is flat in its processing. So if you open up a levels window, you're going to get your histogram that you're going to see. And then what you do is you go ahead and you say, okay, my histogram stops right here, not on the actual image, but pretend the image is a histogram. All right. You'll grab that little white triangle and you move it to the left so it just barely touches it. The best way to do it is, if you're using a Mac, to press the Option key and don't release it. If you're using a PC, to press the Alt key and don't release it. and then click on the little white triangle under the bottom right side of the histogram, and your screen will go black if you're holding both of those two things down. And then you'll move your slider from right to left until the brightest thing in the image lights up. Well, your brightest thing is going to be your water, and your water is still a little bit dark and muddy. It'll come to life and pop more, and that's where you stop your image. Now you're going to do the same thing with the black. Hit your Option or Alt key again, press the black triangle on the lower left side of your levels histogram that popped up, and move it from left to right until the darkest thing in the image lights up. What's that darkest thing going to be? It's going to be right up in here. Do I care about detail right there? No, I don't. So I'd probably go a little bit further until something of importance starts to light up as a little white dot, and that's where you release it. Now I've got my white point and my black point established. Now, this image needs contrast. It'll bring out some of the anatomy in the water, whether it be the fountain, whether it be the flat water, horizontal water. So what you do is, under that levels window, under that histogram again, is a little box right in the middle of the bottom. It's got the number 1 or 99. You click on it and then hit your down arrow key a couple times to probably 0.95. That will be adding contrast. That's the best way to add contrast. And this image will look tremendously better. 6.
Rippled reflection.
I don't know where this is, but I've seen this tree in so many different camera clubs. It's not funny. And that's irrelevant. So I don't think that's got anything to do with scoring. It's really a cool looking tree. I love its position in the frame. I think that you've elected to use a nice reflection. Let me ask you a question. Do images often look best when they're broken into equidistant top half and bottom half? Or do they usually, not always, but usually look better when you break them up more like a 2/3, 1/3? And if you read the textbooks of the masters, that 2/3, 1/3 often has a better presentation. So then what do? I say to myself, okay, I love this tree. Right now, how I have it, the tree line in the background merges with the top of the main tree. So the two are competing with each other. I would like to change that so that that line is not even. I do want to include the reflection. And how about if you got really low again, you would still show your reflection. You would make this tree higher than the background. It would stand out much better, and the perspective would give a whole new meaning to your image. The next thing is it a horizontal, a square, or a vertical format? In the vertical format, the tree and its reflection look good. This is coming right in the middle. It's coming from out of the frame. It kind of, I think, takes away and makes it a little more static in its presentation. Square format, I've never been here. I have no idea what's on the right side. Every tree I see of this, every image I see of this tree, everybody does the same thing. So I can only assume there's something on the right that nobody wants to show. But if it's not the case, I would probably break this up so it's not kind of straight down the middle. More of a square format or a horizontal if this overall scene is better. The processing, we're detailed and blown out in areas over here. 6.
The Pacific at sundown.
Great job in exposure. So you've simplified your image. I am going to tell you once again that your eye sees those 40 shades of brightness, darkness very well, and the camera doesn't. So when you're going to shoot like this, you're shooting as a silhouette. Silhouettes become all about the anatomy of the silhouette. So this is exposed beautifully. This tree looks gorgeous, its anatomy. This tree looks nice with its anatomy. This has nice anatomy. These 3 trees bunch up together and detract from the anatomy and make it a big blob of you can't see much. So in silhouettes, I would strongly say focus on anatomy. And one of the things here, I think, I don't know what's on the right side of this tree, but the trifecta of these trees here would possibly be awesome if you can get a little further to the right. I would probably go a little higher on the top. The fact that the trees aren't the same height is great. I would consider eliminating most of these trees on the left, or maybe cropping it here before it gets crazy. I'd probably take it out, be honest with you. I'd probably take it there and swing more to the right. I think it would be helpful. 7.
Ashore abstract.
You've committed more to one aspect of this, the water, than you have the sand. I think it works great. You know, your color palette is very pleasing and your exposure on it is very pleasing. I will say that the subtleties in the darker horizontal strands, I think, play out very nicely. Your choice of shutter speed, making this more of a blurred image, I also think works very nicely. You're getting a little blotchy up in here, and I don't know why. I'm going to take this away, but look a little closer. You're getting blotchy up in there. You know, you've got this dark shadow. It disappears right there. It comes back into play. Same thing here and here. And I don't know, something looks a little fugazi, as we say up in here in Italian country. So just be careful with that. 7.
Tugboat on intercoastal.
The perspective from near to far, I think, helps elevate the overall feel of your image. I'm going to look through that viewfinder and ask myself lots of questions. What's the most interesting part of this? Is it this building that looks just like that building, what looks just like that building, which is like that building, what looks just like that building? Or is it this over here, which is different than everything else, and it's really cool in my frame? And I'm going to say that I'm going to concentrate more on what's on the left. If I'm going to concentrate more of what's on the left, we have this one cool Volvo Caterpillar. It's not a Caterpillar, it's a Volvo, but whatever you call this piece of machinery. And would I clip it on the left? Would I get a little closer? Would I show the barge meeting the water? Would I swing my camera a little bit lower? Or would I get my camera lower to do that? Something I would consider. Right now, you've got this side of the frame, then you got the other side, which is nice. I think the left side's cooler. I would show more of the left side than you are. Again, we're very harsh in the contrast. Can you separate what's happening here to the bottom, they're not wheels, the tracks to the vehicle. I'm gonna get rid of my mess. And, it all kind of merges together. So we're really having the contrast. And I think we're awfully too vibrant in the yellow right there. 6. Reprocess this. You'll definitely score better just the way it is.
Alone on the beach.
This is why you only eat Mexican food 12 hours before you're going to be with other people. So this particular guy here tells a cool story between the other people. He's almost in the same size realm as the other people. And I wonder if you could sneak up a little closer and make him be big and take on more of a dominant element in the frame. Maybe not even have him in the middle, and maybe balance him with, the lifeguard stand over here, or not, might make him stand out much better than everybody else. 6.
Taking a soak.
No, I'm not going to say anything. The interaction, the head position of the adult with the young one is really pretty cool. You got to watch your whites are a little on the blown out side. I do think we could do a better job in balancing this with shadows and highlights and Vivesa and everything. And you probably didn't blow them out, but I think you can make this processing look better. 7.
The rain man cometh.
You know, very cool, very cool. Want to think this out a little bit. What are the coolest parts of the rain that you can, the rain splatter? The splatter at the top. Let me get this out of here. The splatter at the top is super cool, right? These big ones are cool. Then we get a little bit of a void. We don't have anything in the glass that's going on. And what makes it seem even more dominant is you have nothing going on in the background element, which is out of focus going on. This is the part which is most devoid of anything. You've got enough water droplets to the top to add interest to hold weight for that whole section. You've got enough in the buildings and trees on the bottom to do the same. And then you're kind of void, smack dab in the middle. What could you do to help add strength to that? If you got lower, what would happen? If you got lower, you'd have a base of your house right here, which would probably look great. It's fine the way it is, but it would probably look a little better. You would make these trees come up and occupy that space. You wouldn't change the overall feel of what's going on. I might even consider moving a hair to the right because this, and this is really cool. 7.
Hawaiian blowhole.
You know, same comment as before. Low hole would stand out better by getting lower. The next thing is, I don't think anything is sharp in the frame, and you have a pretty fast shutter speed. So I'm going to say that we probably either have a little bit of out of focus or camera movement. 6.
Falls, mist, and clouds.
All right, and I guess in an open competition, you could push color as much as you want, right? The answer is yes. It's pretty cool. You know, overall, I think it's got a very nice feel to it. I like the composition. I like your edge right there, how you lead me in and through, how you cropped it with the clouds, the triangles, everything that kind of takes me into the frame. You know, would I tweak this a little bit by opening up the shadows a little bit? I think that would be helpful. Would I tone this down a little bit? Definitely up in here. I think it would be helpful. Even if you tone down the sky, be a little bit more dominant. I think that would be helpful. I might even open up the exposure in the water a little bit. So in Vivesa, with about 60 seconds, I think that this image would just be a home run. Still really nice. 7.
River cruise.
All right, listen, a beautiful light, great exposure. When do you press the shutter? Right when you did. Choice's shutter speed is awesome. I think your use of colors pushed a little bit, but it's okay and open. I don't think it's garish or by any means. I do find it overall pleasing. You know, if you tone down a little bit of the saturation that's probably oversaturated in the reds here, it would make the reds in the water stand out even more and give you more of a sense of travel destination. It's still awesome image. 7.
Deep dive.
The color patterns in this, because this is what it really becomes down to, is color patterns. You know, we've got, you know, this hand with, you know, all these fingers, the way it looks like they have all these fingers because of the way it's reflecting through the water is one thing, one element. Then you've got this over here, and we're leaving me with voids. I think that if you're looking for a color pattern, because other than the hand, I can't make out what's going on. I think your image should be tighter. I think we're kind of falling off. You know, this, how cool is, like, say, gets rid of that. How cool is what's in my inner circle as an abstract compared to the way the balance changes is with everything being shown. 6.
Hawaiian shoreline.
All right, overall pleasing lighting. You know, your lighting is coming in from, you know, more of a backlighting scenario, and I think it kind of looks pretty cool. I think you've done a very nice job with your exposure. You know, you're a little hot in a couple little tight spots, but overall, I think you've done a nice job with your exposure. I'm going to ask you, how's your foreground? Well, first of all, what's that? Stands out, take on its own identity. You got this that kind of leads me right down. It's at the edge. It leads me right out of the frame. Is this all nice enough that we're going to make it kind of flat going through? How's all of that? That's really cool. How's all of that? That's fairly cool. So for me, the coolest part is this and the water. So I even like the leading line here, but then I'd have to change my position, swing my camera, something to do and try to capitalize on a great leading line that you have there. I would try to eliminate some of this foreground and concentrate on more your middle ground. Maybe if you want to show this much foreground, I'd go stand over here if it's not slippery and it's safe. And then you can include some of it on a more wide angle. And you know, you're all devoid of detail down in here. You could eliminate some of that. And I think your picture really could be really cool out in some of that area. 7.
Crawling.
Well, compositionally, I think you've done a nice job here. Very nice. I love your tree line, how it ends, the oar, the net, the people, the intent look on this person. Unfortunately, this guy's kind of smiling at me, which I know you're not going to control. But if you have other frames where they're not smiling at you, I think that would be a little more of an interesting. They're fishing, you know, they're not just posing for the camera. So I think that would be a little cooler. How's your exposure? I think we can decrease the exposure in the water a little bit. I think it would help. 7.
Floating.
Anatomically, the difference between the shape that's created there and the shape that's created here, I think is pretty cool. I don't know that I would clip this edge like that. I'm going to go with a 6.
Hawaiian sunset over the Pacific.
You've placed elements nicely in the frame. The balance between the landmass, the light rays, the two boats is very pleasing. I'm would consider toning that down a little bit. You know, if you can get that sky to tone down a little bit, I think it would be helpful. 7.
Okay, round 2 is 14. Water group 2. Sunken Meadow, Long Island.
8.
Water art.
8.
The actual bridge on the River Kwai.
9.
Dancing Waters.
8.
Wednesday Wash Day in Venice.
7,
The Pacific at sundown.
7,
Ashore abstract.
8,
Taking a soak.
7,
The rain man cometh.
9,
Fall mist and clouds.
9,
River cruise.
9,
Hawaiian shoreline.
7,
Trawling.
8,
Hawaiian sunset over the Pacific.
9.
Okay, so we have 5 here.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. This is an assigned subject, correct?
Yes, it is, sir.
And what's the topic?
Water.
Okay. And I knew the answer to that, everybody. But if the topic is water, I do think that the water should be the strength of the image. Otherwise, it's not fair to the purpose of this competition. So with that being said, let me see 3 images. Next one. Next one. And the last one. Okay. This is 3rd.
This is 3rd?
Yes.
Okay.
And if we can go back to the other 2 that I mentioned. You know, yeah, so this is really almost all about water in some form. Let me see the water droplets. And it's the water in this image that really brings this image to life. Let me see the other one. Oh my God. All right. I'm going to go with this waterfall as number 1. The water droplets is number 2.
Wait, the water, this one is which one?
This is number 2.
This is number
2.
2. Okay, hold on, let me
I had some
backslash.
compositional comments about this. I had no compositional comments about this. Just talked
Okay.
about maybe opening up a little bit of a dark area and just tone
Cool.
it. So this is number 1.
Okay. Stonebridge Water Photography Club Water Group 2, honorable mention. The actual bridge on the River Kwai. Harvey, beautiful job as always. River Cruise, Harvey, once again. Love your color, Harvey. 3rd place. Hawaiian sunset over the Pacific. Mark, that's me. Thank you. Second place, the Rain Man Cometh Bobby, beautiful Bobby. And first place, Fall Mist and Clouds, Mario, once again, a great job. Okay, I'm going to just stop sharing.
All right, Rich, if you could stay muted, and everybody else, if you want to yell at me or ask me a question, go right ahead.
Nice.
You want me to permanently mute him?
No, I love Rich.
Phil, you mentioned a few times about getting lower, which I understand. Considering the limits of our age group, I mean, that's not always possible, getting lower, because you may get lower, but you may not get higher ever again.
Right.
If you know.
Very true.
Well, now you say that, and I've been told that a million times, but I would bet every single one of you, if you were standing up and I asked you to kneel down, you could
I got
probably do that.
7 joint
You don't have to stay there very long.
7 joint replacements.
You know?
Okay. But then the other, I mean, I agree with, that is a factor. And and another thing, when we're talking about some of the times, and another judge said it the same thing, looking down on birds is not always the best thing. So going to an observe in Florida, when you're on a boardwalk and the birds are down below in the water, then what would your, options? You can't get lower because you can't
Okay.
get lower. You're on a boardwalk.
I can answer that. All right. Number one, in regards to the scenics, you may not be able to get lower, but if you're on a tripod and you put the tripod so that the camera is waist high, right? You can't see through the viewfinder because you can't get low enough. But most of the newer cameras have an LCD that swings out and points up so you can see your composition without looking through the viewfinder. So that's something to consider. I do that a lot of times when I want to take something totally on the ground. I have a platypod and I can't get low enough to see through the viewfinder because I may be in a scenario where I just don't want to lay on the ground because it's like, really a disgusting ground. So I may just, flip that up and I'll be able to see. I've done that hanging off the side of a little tiny tour boat. Maybe not one as high off the water as the icebergs, but off of a little tiny thing in Cabo, taking that camera, flipping that thing down, getting really low. And I got a really cool shot of the sea lion, right in front of me with the perspective. So that's one thing. The next thing is on the boardwalks. I just got back from Cotahatchee. I shot there for a couple of days, and then I did 9 days of bird photography in Florida. And some of the places like Green Cay also, you're stuck on this boardwalk and you can't shoot down. One of the things that's a benefit is longer telephoto lenses because you're decreasing the sharpness of your angle. Now, some people either can't afford a long lens, don't want to spend the money on a long lens, or are physically not able to carry a long lens anymore. So you can't make every scenario competition worthy. That's just the bottom line. If you have control over it, you should. What I would recommend is that, you're at Cotahatchee, for those of you who have been there, there was a great blue heron walking in the water fishing. I didn't even bother photographing him because I was shooting down on him so much. And he was far away from me with a 600, but it was still an angle that was not going to make me happy. I could do a better job of getting on a beach, with a great blue heron and take a picture than I'm going to get there. So instead there, I concentrated on the birds that were eye level with my 100 to 500 in the trees, nesting, flying in and out, with and without nesting material. And I put my focus on that instead, because there's so much to photograph. You're never going to photograph everything on there. So you go for more of the things that then you do the best you can.
Okay, good points. Do you like the platypod? Because I was thinking about that and I'm not sure. Another investment.
So the platypod is not that expensive. And if you're not using a big lens, you could buy the cheaper one. They have a smaller one and a bigger one. Everybody with the platypod it's a metal plate with a little 1/4-inch screw coming out of it that you can screw your ball head onto. And then you can get your camera so that you're shooting low enough that if you're like in Times Square, you're lower than the height of the curb. You don't even need the bullhead. You could screw it into the bottom of the camera and then flip that LCD up, like I said, and now you're lower than the curb. But now you're gonna have to get down on your knees because you're gonna have to be able to see the LCD. So if you're able to get down lower, there's cool times to use it. Another time that's really cool to use it is I'm in Queens and I want to photograph the Triborough Bridge as it comes off of wherever it comes from. I forgot what borough it comes out of, but it comes into Queens and there's a walkway that you walk across so you can be right over it. Well, you could set your tripod up, but there's people walking all over the place. And sooner or later, not only are people looking at you and you're a target, and New York's a little crazy for anyone who thinks it's not. I have lots of family members and friends in New York. New York's crazy. The other thing is you have a square railing that you can rest it on. And if it's not a square railing, an accessory, you could buy a strap that goes around it. But here's another cool thing you can do. You get a little bean bag and you can put it on a railing. You don't even need a bean bag. When I travel to Europe and you're going to go on these cathedrals or wherever you're going to go, you can't bring a tripod. And I want to shoot draped at the field. I want to shoot at F16 or F22. And you just can't do it because the light's so low. So what I'll do is I'll get a hefty sandwich bag, Ziploc bag, 2 of them. And then when I get to Europe, I'll go to a store, I'll buy a little rice. I'll fill the bag with rice. I'll bring with me an almost empty roll of duct tape. So it's light and small. When I get there, I'll zip the bag closed and I'll duct tape around the whole thing. So it's just a bag of like a duct tape around the whole outside so the rice can't come out. And now that little light thing, I'll stick it up against the pole, on a pew, wherever. And now I've got a tripod immediately. If I push the camera into it and I depress the shutter slow, I mean, I have shots that I took at 3 minutes with no camera shake up against the pole. You know, the Vatican Museum, that circular spiral walkway that goes down. You're on the top railing with your little bag of rice. Boom. Well, I didn't move it. I took 7 different long exposures. And in the computer, I took someone cool taking a picture in this corner of this person over here. And then another image, I took this person from here and put them there. And it was all long exposures and it works great. So you don't even need a platypod if you want to do that. You know, Rockefeller Center, they're not going to let you use a tripod. You're not going to use a platypod. But if you tape the rice bag to the bottom of your camera, then you can put your camera on that concrete pillar and you've got yourself a nice sturdy tripod for a long exposure. So that works. That's a great little tool to use for something like that.
Okay.
Sure. Anybody else have anything that they want to ask or? Sure. What do you got?
Bobby, you're unmute yourself, Bobby.
Got it. Okay.
I'm
I
un-
wanted to
I'm
ask
under
about,
orders to mute myself.
what was that?
I said I'm under orders to mute myself.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
don't
so I do have a question about that fountain that you
Which one?
commented on.
Which one? We saw a couple.
That was the one with
with the
it was
golden
a s-
light.
it had a center high part, and then there were other parts coming from a ring around the
Yes,
pond.
that was the one with the golden light. Well, not
Okay,
golden
yes.
sunlight. It was golden artificial light. There were beautiful
Yes,
lights on it.
yes. So the thing is this, I would like to know how I could improve that using
Okay.
Photoshop.
So let me ask
Using-
you, just in Photoshop.
Yes,
Okay. I just, if you'll allow me to say one thing, and you may not agree with it on your particular image, but the thing that always hurts me the most is when I get home to the light, to the light room, to the light table, which is the computer nowadays, and I say, oh, you know what? I should have this or that.
oh, yes.
Not be a place that I could just run to like the local park again. So I always want everyone to think more when they're taking the picture. What are the focal points? Where they position? What's the strengths? How's the foreground, the midground, the background? Should I change my perspective, my angle of view, my focal length? All when we're taking it. And then the computer should just be for fine tuning. I don't know that you can make that look any better on the computer because I thought you processed it beautifully.
Well,
I-
well, I have to tell you, that is a made picture.
Okay,
I took a very small part of the picture and I'd say 60% of that was made just using Photoshop tools.
okay.
So I
But
just
think-
wondered,
I think it looked great. I just thought that we didn't maximize the strength of the water. Because what maximized the strength was the water against the dark background. And the only way to make that jump out would be to get that camera as low to water level as you're able to, whatever the limitations may be. But my guess is you took that standing up all the way.
I did.
Yeah, so the angle of view again is something that if you look at the true masters of landscape photography, it's not Phil Echo, it's the guys like David and Mark Munch and people like that. I mean, look at what they do over and over again. They usually have a dominant foreground element. We didn't see a lot of dominant foreground elements today. Maximize your foreground element by getting low, getting close, making it large in the frame. It changes your overall perspective, and
Yes, yes.
images, you're just like, whoa, right out of the gate. As soon as it comes up, before you even get to the rest of the image. That's one of the things they do. But they also, ask those questions, and they spend a lot of time in the planning. I'd rather take less pictures and be happier with a higher percentage than the opposite. So
I'm sure.
yes.
Yes.
So, I'll spend more time, like certain things I won't spend a lot of time on. Now, listen, nothing against that heron with the fish in all those reeds. Nothing against you. It's just that heron is not in a photographable location. So I don't care how good you are. And you did a nice job, the maker, whoever you are. But the location was just not friendly for a good photograph. So that's something I would take a quick shot and then I would leave it and move on. Unless that bird is moving laterally and I'm expecting it to come out into a clearing, if the cattle egret was real tight against those mangroves or whatever it was in, and the lighting was not real pleasing. Well, if the cattle egret was far from the background, I would spend some time on it. If the cattle egret's in that position, I would just take a picture just to take it. Or if I had the power, I'd try to zoom in and get a headshot, because then I can minimize that background, but that's just a background that no matter how good you are, you're not going to make it look great. Now, if it's an unbelievable action that's going on that you're never going to duplicate, I'd still take that picture, but there's certain things where I think where time is better spent trying to find something that is going to give you a higher impact end result than focusing on things that are nice, but they're really not your money shot.
Thank you very much, Phil.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, see you later.
Thank you,
Right.
Phil. Thanks. Good
All right.
comments. I like that you really went into a lot of thought on each photograph.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.